Hey there, friend. Welcome to this quiet corner of history where ancient stories unfold like silk in moonlight. Whether you're settling in for the night or simply seeking a gentle escape from the rush of modern life, I'm glad you've joined me here. Tonight, we're not hurrying anywhere. We're drifting back through time, back to when the Nile ran gold in the morning sun and kingdoms rose from desert sand like mirages made real. Before we begin our journey, I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. What city, what country, what time zone has brought you to this moment? There's something wonderfully connecting about knowing we're all here together, scattered across the world, but united by these ancient whispers. If this kind of storytelling brings you peace, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly helps you unwind. Now, close your eyes if you haven't already. Let the weight of your day settle into the mattress, like sand sinking through an hourglass. Tonight, we're stepping into the sandals of someone who commanded empires, who spoke and nations trembled, who lived behind walls of gold and ivory, yet remained, in the end, utterly human. Tonight, we walk through a single day in the life of a pharaoh in biblical times. Picture this. The first light of dawn creeps across the eastern desert, painting the great river in shades of copper and flame. Palm trees sway in the morning breeze, their fronds whispering secrets to the awakening sky. Somewhere in the distance, ibis calls echo across the water, and the scent of lotus blossoms drifts on the air. This is Egypt, the land of wonders, where gods walked among men, and men sometimes believed themselves gods. Our pharaoh awakens not to an alarm clock, but to the soft chanting of priests in the temple courtyards. The sound drifts through his palace windows like incense, a reminder that even before his eyes open, the machinery of his divine kingdom is already in motion. He is not just a man, you see. He's the living embodiment of Horus, the falcon god, the bridge between heaven and earth, the shepherd of millions. But first, let's understand what it meant to be pharaoh in these ancient times. This wasn't merely a job title or political position. The pharaoh was considered the living son of Ra, the sun god himself. Every breath he took was believed to be divinely ordained. Every word he spoke carried the weight of cosmic law. The welfare of the entire kingdom depended not just on his decisions, but on his very existence. If the pharaoh was healthy, the Nile would flood properly, the crops would grow, and Egypt would prosper. If he was unwell, the entire natural order might fall into chaos. Imagine the weight of that responsibility resting on your shoulders before you've even had your morning meal. Imagine waking up knowing that millions of people believe your mood might determine whether their children have enough to eat this year. It's a burden that would crush most mortals. Yet this is the world our pharaoh inhabits, the divine theatre in which he must play his part every single day. As consciousness slowly returns to him, he lies still for a moment in his bed of ebony and gold, feeling the cool linen sheets against his skin. The bed is enormous, carved with images of protective deities and inlaid with precious stones that catch the morning light like captured stars. Above him, a canopy of the finest silk provides shade, its fabric so delicate it seems to float rather than hang. The chamber itself is a marvel of ancient luxury. The walls are painted with scenes from the afterlife, bright blues and golds and crimsons that seem to glow with their own inner light. Hieroglyphs march in neat rows across the surfaces, telling stories of his divine ancestors, of battles won and kingdoms conquered. The floor is polished granite, cool to the touch, with carpets of woven gold thread scattered like islands of comfort. But even in this splendor, the pharaoh's first thoughts are not of luxury. They are of duty. Before he can even sit up, his mind is already cataloguing the challenges that await him. The harvest reports from the southern provinces, the diplomatic messages from neighboring kingdoms, the endless petitions from his subjects seeking justice, mercy, favor from their divine king. A soft rustling at the chamber entrance signals the arrival of his personal servants. They move like whispers made flesh, their bare feet silent on the stone floors. These are not ordinary servants, but carefully chosen attendants who have served the royal family for generations. They know his preferences without being told, understand his moods with a glance, and guard his privacy more fiercely than any armed guard. The first servant carries a golden basin filled with water perfumed with myrrh and frankincense. The second bears clean linen garments, each piece embroidered with protective symbols and blessed by the temple priests. The third holds a polished bronze mirror that reflects not just his image, but his divine nature back to him. As he rises from his bed, the pharaoh's body moves with the measured grace of one trained from birth in the art of kingship. Every gesture is deliberate. Every movement carries meaning. He cannot simply stretch and yawn like an ordinary person. Even these simple actions must be performed with the dignity befitting a god-king. The morning ablutions begin with ritual precision. The scented water is warmed to the exact temperature, neither too hot nor too cold. It has been blessed by the priest of Thoth, the god of wisdom, to ensure that the pharaoh's mind remains sharp throughout the day. As the servants gently wash his hands and face, they murmur quiet prayers for his health and prosperity. Next comes the anointing with sacred oils. These are not mere cosmetics, but holy substances believed to maintain the pharaoh's connection to the divine realm. Oil of cedar from Lebanon to grant him wisdom. Oil of lotus to ensure his words carry divine authority. Oil of myrrh to protect him from the malevolent forces that constantly seek to undermine royal power. Each drop is applied with reverent care, each motion choreographed by centuries of tradition. The selection of clothing is itself a sacred ritual. The pharaoh cannot simply choose what to wear based on comfort or personal preference. His garments must reflect his divine nature, communicate his power to all who see him, and provide magical protection throughout the day. The linen is the finest available, woven by master craftsmen and dyed with precious pigments. The white represents purity and divine light, while the gold thread worked into the fabric symbolizes his connection to Ra, the sun god. As the servants dress him, they chant quietly under their breath, invoking the protection of various deities. Isis to guard his health, Ptah to strengthen his leadership, Mut to ensure justice flows through his decisions. The pharaoh stands motionless during this process, allowing the ancient words to wash over him like a gentle tide. The crowns of Egypt wait nearby on their sacred stands. Today, he will wear the Kepresh, the blue crown of war, for he must review military reports and make decisions about defending Egypt's borders. The crown is not merely decorative but is believed to channel the power of the gods directly into the pharaoh's mind. As it settles on his head, he feels the familiar weight of divine responsibility settling on his shoulders. Now comes the application of the sacred cosmetics. The kohl that lines his eyes is not vanity, but protection, warding off the evil eye and allowing him to see beyond the veil of ordinary perception. The rouge on his lips and cheeks represents the life force of Ra flowing through his mortal form. Each stroke of the brush is applied with ritual precision, transforming him from man to living god. His jewelry is selected with equal care. The golden collar that spans his shoulders bears the images of protective deities and sacred animals. The bracelets on his wrists are inscribed with spells to strengthen his grip on power. The rings on his fingers each carry specific magical properties, some to enhance wisdom, others to ensure his words are obeyed, still others to protect him from poison and assassination. As the final preparations are completed, the pharaoh gazes at his reflection in the bronze mirror. The face that looks back at him is both familiar and strange, human yet divine. He sees his father's eyes, his mother's nose, but also something else, something that transcends mere flesh and blood. This is the face that will appear on statues and temple walls for thousands of years to come. The image that will inspire awe and devotion long after the man behind it has joined his ancestors in the afterlife. A gentle chime signals that the morning preparations are complete. Beyond the chamber doors, the palace is fully awake now. Servants hurry through corridors, carrying trays of food and precious objects. Guards stand at attention in their appointed places. Scribes sharpen their reed pens and prepare their papyrus scrolls. Priests burn incense in the temple courtyards, sending prayers and sweet smoke up to the heavens. The pharaoh takes a deep breath, feeling the weight of the crown on his head, the texture of the fine linen against his skin, the cool touch of gold and precious stones adorning his body. In moments, he will step through these doors and become not just a man, but the living embodiment of divine power on earth. His subjects will prostrate themselves before him, seeking his blessing, his judgment, his protection. But for now, in these last quiet moments before the day truly begins, he allows himself to simply be, to feel the morning breeze flowing through the palace corridors, to listen to the distant sound of the Nile lapping against its banks, to remember that beneath all the gold and ceremony and divine pretense, he remains wonderfully, terrifyingly human. The great doors await, and beyond them, a kingdom that depends on his wisdom, his strength, his connection to the gods. But that's a story for the next part of our journey, when we follow our pharaoh as he steps into the blazing Egyptian sun and begins the work of ruling the greatest civilization the ancient world has ever known. For now, rest easy knowing that somewhere in the mists of history, in a palace beside the eternal Nile, a king prepares to face another day of divine responsibility, carrying the hopes and fears of millions on his shoulders as naturally as he wears his golden crown. The great cedar doors swing open with barely a whisper, their bronze hinges oiled to perfection by servants who understand that even the sound of opening doors must reflect the pharaoh's divine nature. No harsh creaking, no jarring scrapes, just the soft sigh of wood moving through air like breath through sleeping lips. Beyond the threshold, the palace corridors stretch in both directions, their limestone walls painted with scenes of eternal life, of gods blessing mortals, of the pharaoh himself standing among the immortals as their equal. But first, before he can step into the world of governance and ceremony, comes the morning meal. Even gods must eat, though nothing about this meal resembles the hurried breakfasts of common folk. The pharaoh's food is not merely sustenance, but a sacred offering, each dish prepared according to ancient recipes blessed by the temple priests, each ingredient chosen for its spiritual as well as nutritional properties. The dining chamber is smaller than his sleeping quarters, but no less magnificent. A table of polished granite sits at its center, inlaid with gold hieroglyphs that tell the story of the first pharaoh who united Upper and Lower Egypt. The chairs are carved from ebony imported from distant Nubia, their arms shaped like lions' paws, their backs adorned with the spreading wings of protective vultures. The servants who attend the morning meal move with choreographed precision. They have rehearsed this ritual countless times, understanding that the pharaoh's breakfast is not a private affair, but a ceremony that connects him to the cosmic order. The first servant carries a tray of bread, not ordinary bread, but loaves baked in special ovens tended by priests, made from grain, grown in fields, blessed by the tears of Isis herself. The bread is still warm, its crust golden as the sun at noon, its interior white as the sacred lotus. It has been shaped into forms that honor the gods, some loaves twisted like the spiral of eternity, others molded into the shape of the Ankh, the symbol of life itself. As the pharaoh breaks the bread, he performs a ritual that echoes the creation of the world, the moment when the first god brought order from chaos. Next comes the fruit, arranged on platters of hammered gold like jewels displayed for a goddess. Dates from the oases of the western desert. their sweetness concentrated by the burning sun. Figs from the delta, their purple skins split to reveal flesh the color of garnets. Grapes from vineyards tended by generations of farmers who know that their fruit will grace the table of the living God. The Pharaoh eats slowly, deliberately, tasting not just flavor, but the essence of his kingdom in each bite. The dates carry the patience of desert dwellers. The figs hold the fertility of the delta. The grapes contain the joy of harvest festivals. This is not merely breakfast, but communion, a way of consuming the very spirit of Egypt itself. Wine flows from golden pitchers, not the harsh brew drunk by laborers, but vintage aged in underground chambers beneath the temples. It has been blessed by priests of Osiris, strained through linen so fine it could be worn by queens, and mixed with honey from bees that feed on lotus blossoms. As the Pharaoh sips, he feels the warmth spread through his body, connecting him to the earth that produced the grapes, to the sun that ripened them, to the hands that transformed them into this divine nectar. The meal proceeds in comfortable silence, broken only by the soft whisper of servants' feet on stone and the distant sound of the palace awakening. Through the high windows, shafts of golden sunlight slant across the chamber, illuminating motes of dust that dance like tiny spirits in the air. The Pharaoh watches them for a moment, these microscopic dancers, and sees in their movement a reflection of his own kingdom. Millions of individual lives swirling together in patterns too complex for any mortal mind to fully comprehend. As the meal draws to a close, a new figure enters the chamber. This is the chief scribe, an elderly man whose back is bent from decades of hunching over papyrus scrolls, whose fingers are permanently stained with ink, whose eyes hold the accumulated knowledge of the royal administration. He carries with him the day's reports, rolled scrolls tied with ribbons that indicate their urgency and importance. The red ribbons mark military dispatches from the borderlands where Egyptian forces stand guard against raiders from the eastern deserts. The blue ribbons identify reports from provincial governors, men appointed by the Pharaoh to oversee distant cities and ensure that local officials remain loyal to the crown. The white ribbons contain religious matters, petitions from temple priests, reports of festivals and ceremonies, requests for royal patronage of new shrines. But before these worldly concerns can intrude, the Pharaoh must complete his morning transformation from man to God. He rises from the table, the golden plates and cups cleared away by silent servants who will purify each vessel with sacred water before storing them in the royal treasury. The morning meal has nourished his body. Now he must nourish his divine nature through the most important ritual of his day. The journey to the royal chapel takes him through corridors lined with statues of his ancestors, each carved from the finest stone, each face bearing the serene expression of one who has successfully bridged the gap between mortality and divinity. Their painted eyes seem to follow his progress, offering silent encouragement and gentle reminder of the weight of tradition he carries. The chapel itself is a masterpiece of sacred architecture, its ceiling painted to resemble the night sky with stars picked out in gold leaf, its walls covered with scenes from the Book of the Dead that guide souls through the afterlife. At the far end stands the sacred shrine, a golden tabernacle that houses the most precious relic in all of Egypt, a small statue of Horus, the falcon god, whose earthly embodiment the Pharaoh represents. Here, in this most holy of spaces, the Pharaoh performs the ritual that defines his very existence. He approaches the shrine alone, for this is a conversation between God and God, requiring no witnesses save the painted deities who watch from the walls. The statue of Horus is no larger than a man's hand, carved from a single piece of lapis lazuli that seems to glow with its own inner light. The Pharaoh kneels before the shrine, not in submission, but in recognition. He whispers the ancient words that have been spoken by every pharaoh since the first dynasty, words so old their original meaning has been lost, but whose power remains undiminished. He asks for wisdom to govern justly, strength to protect his people, and the continued favor of the gods who watch over Egypt. As he speaks, the morning sun reaches its full strength, sending beams of light through the chapel's high windows to illuminate the shrine. The lapis lazuli statue seems to come alive in this golden radiance, its falcon eyes gleaming as if with divine intelligence. For a moment that stretches beyond time, the pharaoh feels the presence of something vast and ancient, a consciousness that has guided Egypt through centuries of triumph and trial. The prayer complete, he rises and turns toward the chapel entrance, where his personal guard awaits. These are not ordinary soldiers, but the elite of the elite, men chosen not just for their skill with weapons, but for their absolute loyalty to the royal person. They wear the finest armor, carry weapons blessed by the war god Montu, and would die without hesitation to protect their divine king. The procession that forms as the pharaoh leaves his private chambers is itself a work of art. Guards march in perfect formation, their bronze spear points catching the morning light, their leather sandals keeping time with military precision. Behind them walk the court officials, men whose lives revolve around the complex machinery of royal administration, each carrying the symbols of his office, each dressed in linen whose quality reflects his position in the palace hierarchy. The pharaoh himself moves at the center of this human constellation, his blue crown blazing in the sunlight, his golden collar casting reflected light on the faces of those around him. He walks with the measured pace of one who knows that every step is observed, analyzed, remembered by those who will whisper of this moment in markets and taverns throughout the kingdom. The first destination of the royal day is the Hall of Justice, where the pharaoh will hear petitions from his subjects and render the divine judgments that maintain order throughout the realm. This is perhaps his most important duty, for the Egyptians believe that justice flows directly from the gods through their earthly representative. A pharaoh who judges fairly ensures that Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice, smiles upon the land. One who shows favoritism or accepts bribes invites cosmic disaster. The Hall of Justice is a vast chamber supported by columns carved to resemble papyrus stalks, their capitals blooming like stone flowers beneath the painted ceiling. At one end sits the throne of judgment, carved from a single block of red granite and inlaid with gold and precious stones. But this throne is more than furniture. It is a sacred seat that connects the pharaoh to the divine source of all justice. As he settles onto the throne, feeling the cool touch of granite through his linen robes, the pharaoh transforms once again. The man who ate breakfast in quiet contemplation, who prayed alone in the chapel, now becomes the living embodiment of divine law. His word will be final, his judgments absolute, his decisions carrying the weight of cosmic authority. The great doors of the hall swing open, and the first petitioners of the day are ushered in. They approach the throne with eyes downcast, overwhelmed by the presence of their god-king, knowing that the next few moments will determine the course of their lives. Some seek justice for wrongs committed against them. Others hope for royal mercy in the face of punishment. All understand that they stand before not just a man, but the earthly representative of the gods themselves. And so begins the most sacred duty of the pharaoh's day, though perhaps sacred is too gentle a word for what unfolds here. For in this hall, beneath painted gods and golden light, human hearts lay themselves bare, and the weight of divine judgment falls upon mortals whose lives hang by threads of testimony and truth. The first petitioner is led forward, a farmer whose weathered hands shake as he prostrates himself before the throne. His case is simple yet profound in its implications. A neighbor has diverted the irrigation channel that has fed his family's fields for generations, leaving his crops to wither under the merciless sun. In ordinary times, this might be settled by village elders, but the neighbor is the brother of a provincial tax collector, a man whose influence has silenced local justice. The pharaoh listens with the stillness of carved stone, his painted eyes revealing nothing as the farmer speaks in trembling tones of failed harvests and hungry children. This is not merely a dispute over water rights, but a test of whether divine justice can reach into every corner of the kingdom, whether the Pharaoh's power extends beyond palace walls to protect the humblest of his subjects. When the farmer's testimony ends, the accused neighbor is brought forward, his fine linen robes and jeweled collar marking him as a man of means. He speaks smoothly, confidently, presenting documents sealed with official stamps, witnesses whose testimony has clearly been purchased with gold. His words flow like honey, sweet and convincing, painting the farmer as a lazy malcontent seeking to profit from royal sympathy. But the Pharaoh has been trained since childhood to read the hearts of men, to see beyond words to the truth that lies beneath. He observes the way the wealthy man's eyes dart toward the shadows, where his brother, the tax collector, stands watching. He notices how the farmer's calloused hands bear the honest stains of soil, while his accusers remain soft and clean. Most telling of all, he sees how the farmer's children wait outside the hall, their thin faces pressed against the window screens, their eyes holding the desperate hope that only comes from genuine need. The judgment, when it comes, carries the force of divine thunder. The water rights are restored to the farmer, the diversion channel to be removed before the next moon. More than this, the tax collector who enabled the theft loses his position, his wealth confiscated to compensate not just this farmer, but others who have suffered under his corruption. The Pharaoh's voice rings through the hall like bronze struck with iron, reminding all who hear that no position, no wealth, no family connection places anyone beyond the reach of divine justice. As the farmer departs, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks, the Pharaoh feels the familiar weight of his role settling deeper into his bones. Each judgment he renders echoes through the kingdom like ripples on the Nile's surface, affecting lives he will never see, touching futures he cannot imagine. This is the burden of godhood made flesh, to hold the scales of justice steady while the winds of favoritism and corruption seek to tip them toward darkness. The morning continues with a parade of human suffering and hope. A widow whose husband's business partner has stolen her inheritance. A young scribe accused of falsifying temple records by a priest who covets his position. A merchant whose caravan was attacked by bandits who somehow knew exactly when and where he would be traveling, suggesting betrayal from within his own household. Each case requires not just judgment, but wisdom, the ability to see through lies and half-truths to the bedrock of reality beneath. The Pharaoh draws upon teachings that stretch back to the first dynasties, principles carved in stone tablets and preserved in the sacred writings. But more than ancient law, he relies on something deeper, an intuitive understanding of human nature that comes from years of watching how power corrupts and desperation drives people to actions their better selves would never contemplate. By the time the sun reaches its zenith, the immediate petitions have been heard, but the Pharaoh's judicial duties are far from over. Now comes the review of cases that will shape the kingdom's future, disputes between temples over land rights, conflicts between provincial governors, questions of succession in noble families where the eldest son has proven unworthy of inheritance. These matters require not just individual judgment, but an understanding of how each decision will reverberate through the complex web of Egyptian society. Grant too much power to the priests, and they may challenge royal authority. Show favoritism to one province over another, and rebellion may flourish in the shadows. Every choice must be weighed not just for its immediate justice, but for its long-term consequences to the stability of the realm. As the afternoon shadows begin to lengthen, the Pharaoh finally rises from the throne of judgment, his body stiff from hours of motionless attention, his mind weary from the constant weight of making decisions that affect thousands of lives. But there is no rest yet, for the day is far from over. and the kingdom's needs extend far beyond the administration of justice. The next phase of his day takes him to the palace's military quarters, where reports await from the borderlands and decisions must be made about Egypt's defenses. In a world where kingdoms rise and fall like desert storms, where raiders from the eastern wastes constantly probe for weakness, where ambitious neighbors eye Egypt's wealth with unconcealed hunger, the pharaoh must be not just judge and priest, but supreme military commander. The war council gathers in a chamber whose walls bear painted scenes of ancient victories, pharaohs riding golden chariots into battle, enemies fleeing before the might of Egyptian arms, tribute being carried from conquered lands. These images serve not just as decoration, but as reminder and inspiration, proof that Egypt's military might has protected the kingdom for countless generations. The generals who attend this council are hard men, their bodies scarred by battle, their eyes holding the cold calculation of those who have seen death dealt and received in the service of their divine king. They speak in clipped military phrases, their reports painted in the stark colours of tactical necessity rather than the subtle shadings of civilian concerns. The news they bring is mixed. The southern garrisons report quiet along the Nubian frontier, the gold mines producing steadily under heavy guard. But in the east, Bedouin raiders have grown bolder, striking at isolated settlements and disappearing into the desert before Egyptian forces can respond. Most troubling of all, spies report unusual activity in the kingdoms beyond Egypt's borders, armies gathering, alliances forming, the subtle preparations that often precede larger conflicts. The pharaoh listens to each report with the focused attention of a hawk studying its prey. Military decisions cannot be made in haste or anger, but require the same careful weighing of consequences that marks all royal judgment. Send too many troops to one frontier, and another becomes vulnerable. Respond too harshly to minor raids, and Egypt may appear aggressive to neutral neighbours. Show too much restraint, and enemies may interpret mercy as weakness. As the council continues, maps are unrolled across oak tables, their papyrus surfaces marked with symbols representing troop positions, supply depots, potential invasion routes. The pharaoh studies these carefully, his finger tracing paths across painted desert and river valley, calculating distances, considering terrain, weighing the 1,000 factors that determine victory or defeat in the harsh mathematics of war. The decisions that emerge from this council will shape not just military strategy, but the daily lives of countless Egyptians. Young men will be called from their fields to serve in the army. Craftsmen will turn from making ploughs to forging spears. Granaries will be emptied to supply distant garrisons. The entire kingdom will bend its resources toward the preservation of the peace that allows civilization to flourish along the Nile's fertile banks. As the war council concludes, and the generals depart to implement the pharaoh's commands, the afternoon sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, painting the palace walls in shades of gold and crimson. But even now, as the day draws toward evening, the pharaoh's duties continue, for kingship knows no end, no moment of true rest. The final obligation of this long day takes him to the royal tomb that is being prepared for his eventual journey to the afterlife. This might seem a morbid preoccupation, but for the pharaoh, it represents the culmination of his earthly service, the transformation from mortal king to eternal God, the moment when his temporary role as divine representative becomes permanent union with the celestial powers. The tomb, carved deep into the living rock of the Valley of the Kings, represents decades of labor by master craftsmen whose skills have been passed down through generations. Every surface is covered with paintings and hieroglyphs that will guide the pharaoh's soul through the dangers of the afterlife. Every chamber filled with treasures that will sustain him in the world beyond death. As he walks through corridors that smell of fresh paint and stone dust, the pharaoh contemplates the strange duality of his existence. He is simultaneously the most powerful man in the world and a mortal being whose life, however divinely blessed, will one day end. The tomb represents both his ultimate triumph, eternal life among the gods, and his ultimate limitation, the boundary that even divine pharaohs cannot cross while still breathing. The artisans working on the tomb prostrate themselves as he passes, their bodies pressing against stone floors still warm from the day's heat. These men have devoted their lives to preparing for his death, their masterful work ensuring that his journey to the afterlife will be as glorious as his earthly reign. They paint with pigments that will last for millennia, carve hieroglyphs with precision that rivals the gods themselves, create a monument that will speak of his divinity long after the last person who knew him in life has joined him in death. As the sun finally touches the western horizon, painting the sky in the sacred colors of renewal and rebirth, the pharaoh makes his way back to his private chambers. The great palace has grown quiet now, its corridors filled with the soft golden light of evening, its courtyards echoing with the distant sound of priests chanting the sunset prayers. In his sleeping chamber, the same servants who dressed him this morning now help him remove the heavy regalia of kingship. The blue crown is lifted from his head and placed reverently on its stand. The golden collar is unclasped and stored in its sacred chest. The ceremonial sandals are removed from feet that have walked the paths of divine authority throughout this long day. As the last of the royal garments are folded away and the pharaoh dons the simple linen robe he wears for sleep, he allows himself a moment of quiet reflection. Today, like every day, he has carried the weight of millions of hopes and fears on his shoulders. He has dispensed justice, commanded armies, communed with gods, and prepared for death. He has been divine and human, eternal and temporary, all-powerful and utterly constrained by the responsibilities of his sacred office. The servants withdraw as silently as they arrived, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the gentle night breeze that flows through the palace windows. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new petitions, new decisions that will echo through the kingdom and beyond. But for now, in these precious moments before sleep claims him, he is simply a man beneath the Egyptian stars, mortal and weary, and grateful for the darkness that offers respite from the blazing light of godhood. Outside his windows, the Nile flows eternal and patient, carrying the dreams of his people toward the sea, while in the distance, the Great Pyramids stand sentinel against the star-filled sky, monuments to pharaohs who once faced the same burdens, made the same choices, and found their own peace in the endless cycle of divine responsibility. And so ends another day in the life of one who is both man and God, ruler and servant, mortal king, an eternal symbol of the divine order that holds the world together. Sleep comes gently to even the mightiest pharaoh, and in dreams, perhaps, he finds the rest that daylight never allows. Rest well, dear listener, and let the ancient rhythms of the Nile carry you into peaceful slumber, where the weight of kingdoms cannot reach and the only crown you wear is woven from starlight and dreams.